Okay, if you could only see the look I get from Merriwether at the intro here. So welcome back to another exciting episode of Merriwether's World. This is now episode 17, where we will be continuing talking about medicinal weeds and wildflowers. And as usual, I am helped tonight with my wonderful daughter, Merriwether, and we will be talking about medicinal weeds and wildflowers. I am focused on what has been scientifically proven through Western science. So stuff that has been shown in a repeatable experiment to have some benefit. Towards that, there are a number of books that I rely on. And so let me just show those quick. Starting again with Herbal Vademecum. This goes into, it covers over 800 plants. And again, it shows the chemistry and what the chemistry does and how best to access those medicinal compounds, whether it be a tincture or a tisane or whatever. So there's that. And in the similar vein, there is the Herbal Medicine of the American Southwest by Charles W. Kane, whereas the first book that I showed you covers just, the world, heavy on North America. The Herbal Medicine of American Southwest focuses on plants found in the Southwest. So those two together give you a really good scientific background on medicinal plants and wildflowers. Now, in addition to it, another book I really recommend for people is Medicinal Herbs by Rosemary Gladstar. This is a really good, what I call kitchen medicine book, where it shows you, with the different herbs and so forth that you have just in your kitchen, how to turn those into medicines that will actually really benefit your family. And then once you've mastered hers, you move on to the modern herbal dispensatory. Now, whereas the others were talking about single or very simple recipes, this one goes into more complex sort of stuff. So think of these as high school, and then this is a college level type herbal medicine thing. But with that will really put you head and shoulders above the average person out there munching on weeds. Okay, another thing, upcoming classes. So we are in 2019, go figure. And there's a number of classes I have scheduled. Remember, all the classes are listed over on www.foragingtexas.com on the right-hand side under the heading Upcoming Classes. But what I have on January 26th, I will be here in Houston at the Discovery Nature Center in Bel Air, which is downtown Houston. So that's January 26th. 27th, I will be up in Driftwood, Texas at the Vista Brewing. Now, I know the Vista Brewing classes are all sold out, but we're working on scheduling some more up there. Then on February 23rd, I will be out in Montgomery, Texas, so kind of over by the Renaissance Festival, if you think about it that way. And that is at Deer Lake Spa and Resort, or Deer Lake Lodge. And then on February 24th, I'll be at the Houston Arboretum, kind of my old stomping ground. So as far as how to register for those, the links are all at www.foragingtexas. Alrighty, so enough of the intro. Now let's get into why you are actually here, medicinal plants and wildflowers. Just out of curiosity, is anyone watching? Oh, cool. Hello, people watching. Thank you for coming. I'm hoping my dad shows up tonight. All right, medicinal plants and weeds and wildflowers, since those are the sort of plants we're going to be focusing on tonight. For those of you new to this series, this has been going on for a while, and I just want to recap the sort of medicinal concoctions that I'll be talking about during this presentation. So basically, starting from easiest to make down to the more complicated. When we talk about a poultice, that's basically just mashing up the leaves, either chewing them up into a pulp, pounding them, chopping them up, occasionally putting them in a blender with warm water, and then just slapping them on your skin somewhere. So think of it as a big soggy mass of plant material stuck somewhere on the body. Hey, Macarena. Okay, a tisane, that is a water infusion. What most people would call a tea, herbalists, however, they consider a tea to be specifically involving the Sensinea plant, Whereas if it's not including the Cincinnati, if it's any other plant soaked in water, that is a tisane. So you'll hear me talk about a tisane. A tincture is where you soak the plant material in some form of ethanol. So drinking alcohol, vodka, brandy, Everclear, depending on what you're extracting and the type of plant you're using and how fresh it is, determines which alcohol is best for that. An elixir is now when you add honey into the tincture. So an elixir is 1 part honey, 1 part alcohol, and 1 part plant material, dried plant material usually. So it's like a very sweet tincture. This is especially good for some really bitter herbs or giving to kids if necessary. An oxymel is interesting. An oxymel is a mixture of vinegar, usually some sort of apple cider vinegar, and honey and the medicinal plant or plants. So think of it as a vinegar-based elixir. Now, a syrup is plant, water, and sugar boiled down into a thick, syrupy, sticky syrup, for lack of a better. Sometimes the English language is lacking. But yeah, syrup is just sugar, water, and the plant boiled down to a thick consistency. The nice thing about syrups, again, they help get over some of the bitter flavors that some of the medicinal plants have, and they are somewhat more shelf stable than a straight tisane. Now, a liniment is a tincture using non-drinkable alcohol, usually isopropyl alcohol, also known as rubbing alcohol, that is applied only externally. So a liniment is just for external applications of the medicinal herbs. An oil infusion is where you take the plant and soak it in oil either at room temperature for a long, long time or heat it up for overnight, 3 nights in a row is my method. At some point I'll do a class specifically on making infused oils because that's really one of my favorite ways of doing it. But really it boils down to just something like sunflower seed oil or olive oil or some other sort of natural plant oil infused with the medicinal compounds extracted from plants. And finally, a salve is when you take the infused oil and mix beeswax to it to stiffen it up, make it harder. So those are the sort of medicinal concoctions that I'll be talking about tonight. And as we go through the plants, I'll be specifically pointing out which of these concoctions is best for that particular plant to achieve a particular effect. Cool? Makes sense? We got a question. Hold it. Okay.
Is the Voynich manuscript the PhD of the plant medicine books?
Okay, for those of you who don't know the Voynich manuscript, Google it. It is one of the great mysteries of the world. It is this multi-hundred-year-old illustrated, illuminated manuscript in some strange language that has not been deciphered with all sorts of weird-looking plants that no one recognizes. They might have, I think maybe 10% of the plants match terrestrial earth plants, but for the most part, the book, the plants don't match anything on earth, and the text doesn't match any language on earth. So what it is, I don't know, other than it's just fascinating. And I know recently a new version. So this has been in a museum for quite a while, but a publisher has reproduced it, so you can now buy it from Amazon, and it's freaky. Anything else?
Yes, 2 more questions. How long should the plant soak in oxymel?
All right, when you are making an oxymel or an infusion, well, an oxymel or a tincture, usually you want to let it sit 6 to 8 weeks. So it is a slow process. And during that time, you want to shake it every day. But 6 to 8 weeks in the vinegar, in the oxymel, in the tincture, in the liniment, in the infused oil. So you need to give it time for the stuff to leave the plant and creep out. It's using what's called Brownian motion, for those of you who remember that from your physics class. Anything else?
1 more question. If a tincture recipe calls for 100 proof vodka, could you use 100 proof whiskey without compromising it?
Yes, it doesn't matter So the question was, can you use vodka or whiskey or whatever as long as it's 100 proof? Yeah, it doesn't matter. The part that is important is how the concentration of the ethanol, rather than all the other little side things in there that give it flavor. A lot of times I like to use brandy for some of the things and then just bump up the alcohol content with a shot of Everclear to get the right amount. I want to ask at this point if there's any problems with the audio. We are trying something new again because in the past we've had some audio problems. So let us know if you can hear both of us or can't or what, and I can adjust it. And I'm getting some thumbs up from Merriwether, so I'm assuming that means the volume is good. Any other questions?
No more questions.
Okay. All right. So moving on. Like I said, enough of my face. Let's to go why you're here. Pimpernel. I've started seeing this already. It's a very small plant. If you remember from your high school literature class reading the Scarlet Pimpernel, this is the plant that is named after, the book is named after. It's kind of a unique plant because its standard flower is kind of, I'm going to call that orange. I'm a guy, there's basically 8 different colors that I can name. So we're going to call these flowers orange, but it also has this weird mutation in quite a few of the plants where it also produces these blue flowers. But in either case, they're 5 petals and very small. I mean, they're smaller than my pinky nail. So a tiny flower. Now, how do you use this? Well, first off, if you want to go into the traditional use, which has not been proven scientifically, but it's kind of interesting nonetheless, and I do have some theories about it. They say if you are sad or suffering from melancholy, have some pimpernel tea, and that will drive the blues away. Not proven scientifically, but it has some other effects that I think might be responsible for that tradition coming about. Now, another thing I do want to say about the pimpernel is it is minor toxicity, in that a lot of times the difference between medicine and poison is simply the dosage. A little bit may be fine, but a lot is too much. So in the case of pimpernel, since you'll be taking it as a tincture or a tea, I really don't recommend more than 1 cup every 2 or 3 days, 1 standard measuring cup of the tea, if you're taking it internally. Now, the whole plant, so the leaves, the flowers, the stem, it's all antimicrobial. Okay, sorry, I had to look at here for a second because I was, again, I noticed I left something out. It's antimicrobial, it's anti-inflammatory, and it's antifungal. So these are properties that have all been proven scientifically. Basically killing bacteria, killing fungus, not so good on viruses. It may help get your lymph system flowing some, to get the T cells there to attack the viruses, but it's not like elderberry or some of the other really good antivirals. So think mainly for bacterial or fungal. To do this, you would take it as a tisane, so a tea, a half teaspoon of the dried pimpernel in a cup of hot water, and just let it sit in the water between 160, 180 degrees for a good 10 minutes. 30 minutes would be better, and then strain out the plant and drink it. You can also use it for surface infections, so like to wash out infected wounds. The other thing about this plant is it is quite bitter, and most bitter plants, one of the side effects is that they stimulate the appetite, because bitter plants trigger often saliva, which basically has a cascade effect down through the body, and it can start increasing the stomach acid secretions. When the stomach acid secretions start increasing, that triggers the brain to be hungry. So here's a tip. If you want to avoid eating lots of food, avoid bitter foods, because one of the things bitter foods do is trigger you and prime your body to eat more. Don't know why, it's just the way we evolved. Now, going back to the whole melancholy thing, think about this. If you're just kind of bland and blah, you're usually not very hungry. So if you have something bitter, say pimpernel, and a half hour later, that cascade effect, the saliva, the stomach bile, and then the stomach hunger pains come in, you decide, I'm going to go eat something. Whoa, what the heck just happened? Sorry, I had a glitch there. So once you eat something, a lot of times you feel better. I know I do, which is, there are days when I feel great, just because I ate far too much. But that's my theory behind the pimpernel and the driving away melancholy. It just makes you hungry, and you go and you eat something, and after you eat something, you feel better. A lot of times, if you're hungry and you want to eat something, you may even search out someone, a friend, to go eat with, and that too helps alleviate melancholiness. But the main thing is the antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. And it'll start showing up, like I said, here in the Houston area. I've started seeing it already, or even back in December, and it will go through into the summer. So it's usually around. You find it in yards and fields. A lot of times, wherever you find chickweed, so somewhat disturbed areas, especially around trails and pathways and edges of parking lots, that's a lot of times where you're going to find the pimpernel. And it has those very unique colored orange and sometimes blue five-petaled flowers, small. Now, just so you can see the warning there, there is some estrogen mimics in this that in large doses, that's one of the reasons you don't want to take a lot of it, is it can actually start screwing up your estrogen cycle, but also large doses can attack the liver. So small, 2-3 cups a week is all you want to take of this. And we have a question.
How strong is pimpernel versus lantana on surface wounds?
Oh, lantana, well, actually, lantana is significantly better on surface wounds. The lantana is antimicrobial and also a wound healing stimulant. It actually triggers the human body to speed up the whole repair process. Pimpernel does not. Pimpernel is just a general antimicrobial, so it does not speed up the healing of wounds. I would much rather use lantana.
What is a good way to distinguish between pimpernel and chickweed if the flowers are not present?
Good question. If you look closely at this picture, and let me just see, can I zoom in? Oh, no. Oh, wait, here we go. Let me just zoom in. Trying anyway. Can you? Nope. All right. Well, ah. Okay. If you go to the Foraging Texas website, you can see both chickweed and pimpernel. Pimpernel, especially the leaves, look very similar to the chickweed. The main identifying characteristics, if the flowers are not present, is on chickweed, along the stem, there'll be a single line of hairs that just runs from one leaf cluster to the next leaf joint, a single line of hairs, and then from there, that line of hairs will flip over to the other side and run up the other side of the stem. Whereas the pimpernel has no hairs on the stem whatsoever. So if there are no flowers present, look at the stem. If there is hair, even just a single line of hair, that is the chickweed. If it is completely bald, that is the pimpernel. Yes.
Are there any domesticated varieties you know of?
Hmm. Domesticated versions of pimpernel. None that I know of, but it grows really well. I would not be surprised if nurseries and so forth actually did sell it as a landscaping plant. I personally don't recall ever seeing it anywhere in any nursery, but it makes nice thick mats. It lasts a long time of the year. It produces these little flowers. No real scent though, and the flowers are very small. The flowers also have a unique feature. Another name for this is the poor man's weather glass, where once the humidity reaches a certain point, the flowers close up and then they will not open again until sunlight hits them. So usually when it's cloudy and about to rain, the flowers will close up, and that's an indication that rain is probably likely. And then as long as the flowers stay closed, basically it means there's still a chance of rain. The clouds have to go away. But yeah, as far as actually landscaping, it does transplant well. It's easy to dig up and put in your landscaping, but it is a low plant. It's just kind of a creeping 4 inches high, sort of thick mat of plants. All right, let me go there. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, so let's move on. Plantain, one of my favorites. And I have this weird feeling. Whoop. Oh,
I was making a weird sound,
okay.
but
So plantain, this is a very common plant,
no
popping
pun
up all
intended.
over the place right now.
No pun intended.
No, no.
Plantain.
Oh, sorry. We're making puns back behind the scenes here. So the plantain, let me just jump forward here. You may recognize it more like this. The main claim to plantain, though I did talk about it in the edible weeds episode of Merriwether's World a number of weeks ago, it's much better medicinally rather than eating. And what you're after with the plantain is the leaves themselves. Somewhat like the lantana, the plantain leaves help trigger healing. They are loaded with a chemical called allantoin, which is a kind of a wound healing stimulant. A lot of the healing hand lotions out there will include that particular chemical to help speed up the healing of dry, cracked skin. But it is also considered to be a demulcent, something that soothes inflamed tissues. The plantain, it's very commonly used to, if you have an insect sting, insect bite, scrape knee, minor burn, they'll take the leaves and just pulp them up and chew them up into a mass and slap it on the minor burn, the minor rash, the insect sting, and it's actually quite soothing. You know, also anti-inflammatory. So if you have some sort of inflammation going on through the throat, the whole GI tract, gastrointestinal tract, the urinary tract, basically anything that's inflamed inside or outside of your body, applying plantain to it will definitely soothe it. So very, very, very good plant for that. I did mention it also stimulates the body's own wound healing properties. The best way of using this is actually either as a poultice, just take ideally the green plant and just mash it up and slap it on the wound, or if need be, swallow it to get it to interior areas. It's also good in an infused oil, so you can chop it up and soak it in sunflower seed oil, olive oil, things like that. One thing I didn't include on this is then as an ointment, anything that can be made into an infused oil you can add beeswax to it to make an ointment. Then the benefit of the ointment is it just stays in place better. It's easier to carry with you in a little tin, kind of like a lip balm sort of thing to just rub it on where needed. But any sort of, if you, especially down in the winter right now, when it's cold and dry, even here in Texas, a plantain-based, just infused oil plantain beeswax mixture is great for your skin. It will help, especially if you use like olive oil or safflower oil or some of the more moisturizing oils. It'll be good at just healing the damaged dry skin. This is a wintertime plant and it does go into spring. You can still collect the leaves as long as the leaves look healthy. So even after the plant has formed the seed heads and the seeds, as long as the leaves aren't starting to dry and split and crack, it's good to go. Any,
Question?
whoop, yeah.
For gastrointestinal tract aid, should you just drink the oil?
Okay, for gastrointestinal GI tract type stuff, you are better off just eating the plant. Drinking the oil, if you take a big slug of vegetable oil, it can be a rather potent laxative. Uh, and if you are having inflammations of the GI tract, suddenly getting a very vigorous bowel movement is not going to help. So ideally in that case, take the green plant, eat it raw, put it in a smoothie, something like that. If all you have is the dry plant, again, is a smoothie is a good way of taking it because that'll chop it up and basically you're taking it with other things that will help. But I would not drink the straight oil. Now, maybe if I made it out of bacon grease, but straight oil, just a slug of that, most people it works as a laxative. Anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Oh,
Wow.
wait, one more.
Oop. Okay.
Any guess of the shelf life of the active ingredients at last after they extracted? Like grammar.
Okay, it depends on what it's been extracted in. The best case, if, well, the dried plant, if you keep it in an airtight sealed jar out of sunlight, because remember the ultraviolet light from the sunlight, even through a window, will break down the plant and the medicinal compounds in it. So keep it either in an amber jar in your cupboard or in a vacuum sealed bag or a baggie or something like that, but out of sunlight. Stored that way, the dried plant is good. The basic rule of thumb is that it is good until the plant shows up again. So it's good, basically another year. In the case of infused oils, it's pretty much the same sort of thing. If you make an infused oil, one of the issues is depending on which oil you use, it can eventually go rancid. For something like this, where you want the oil infusion to last a long time, I highly recommend olive oil. Olive oil has a lot of natural antioxidants in it that help prevent the oil from going rancid very quickly. And one thing you can do to increase the shelf life is get some vitamin E caplets and squeeze those into it too. Squeeze some of the vitamin E oil from the caplet or the gel cap into the infused oil. For every quart, figure about two of the gel caps of vitamin E, and that will help protect the oil from going rancid. With the infused oil, the oil will more likely go bad before the plant loses the potency. The allantoin molecule itself is quite stable. So, anything else?
No.
Okay, just a quick note. Let me just jump over here. Oops, ignore that. That's for later. So if you go to the Foraging Texas website, there's a link to my Amazon store. And if you scroll down that, eventually you get to making herbal medicines. And there's all the goodies you need for that. This is, unfortunately, the whole window. Let me just do one thing here. And bear with me. Okay. So it has, oops, I guess that's all the, okay. Now, trust me, it has all the books and bottles and funnels and filters and beeswax and all that. Though actually with the beeswax, if possible, swing by Uncommon Bees, the local Houston, really the top beekeeper in Houston. They're at a bunch of different farmers markets, and get your beeswax from them. But if not, you can get all this stuff from my Amazon store, amazon.com/shop/foraging Texas. And if you purchase anything from that, I get about 6% of the sales price, which helps keep all this going. All right, but back to the presentation. So we talked about plantain. Moving on, let's talk about pokeweed, also known as poke salad. Some of you might remember the name poke salad Annie from a long time ago. This is another one of those cases where the difference between medicine and poison is very, very small. Pokeweed really is for professional herbalists, but it's still kind of interesting, so I wanted to talk about it. And in particular, the medicinal properties are found in the root of the pokeweed. Keep in mind, the root of the pokeweed is just as poisonous as the rest of the plant, where there are some poisons in there that basically cause your stomach lining to dissolve and flush out of your body, and then followed by a lot of your other internal organs. So it's not a good plant used improperly, but it does have a good, strong medicinal use. Excuse me. And one of its main things is it helps stimulate the lymph system. So if you remember the lymph system, that's not the blood, but it's carrying the other fluid, the lymph, through your body. And that's a key component for fighting infection. Now, the poke also The lymph, when you hurt yourself, if you, or even say lupus or some of the diseases, whenever you have some swelling going on, more often than not, that swelling is due to lymph rather than blood. The lymph is just pooling there, and because it's just not moving. Now, the pokeweed in very, very small doses, and again, I'm serious here, folks. Don't try this at home. If you're going to go with pokeweed, this might be something that a professional herbalist will recommend for you, or later on when you yourself obtain these skills. But if you remember last week when I was saying plant a tree, what I'm doing here is planting a tree in your mind. This is one of your goals, to get to the point where you can safely use pokeweed. But the pokeweed it's taken as a tincture or a tisane, again, very, very, very dilute. We're talking drops here. But it will really be good to help break down the lymph or get the lymph moving to help with any sort of swelling, pooling in the legs or anything like that. Anywhere where swelling and constriction from the swelling is causing problems, a little bit of pokeweed will help with that. And then, of course, it's also a very potent antibacterial. It'll start showing up, depending on where you are, it's actually going to start showing up soon. If you go to the www.foragingtexas.com, there will be pictures of it throughout its life. When it's really young is when it's edible, but more late in the summer is when you want to harvest the roots. And as you can see in the picture here in the sink, they're fairly big, taprooty sort of things going on. I want to thank Tina Critchfield for sending me these pictures. She was kind enough to send them over to Foraging Texas, so thank you very much, Tina. Great plant used properly. But again, this is one of your goals, is to reach the point where you are confidently able to use pokeweed. But seriously, this is one you want to hold off on. How are we on questions?
Got a question? How small a dose of pokeweed exactly?
1 drop? I really shouldn't even answer that question. This is something you need to study and learn on your own. But yeah.
Is there anything that can be taken as a quick counteracting agent for its toxin?
Ooh, counter. The poison control most likely would give you massive doses of activated charcoal and induce vomiting, but I'm not positive. That's something, can you make a note to look that up? That would be, but going back on my memory, which isn't always completely trustworthy, charcoal to absorb the toxins and then vomiting to try and get out of your body before it gets into the bloodstream. I'll tell you, from a food point of view, prepared properly, it's absolutely fantastic. Prepared wrong, you die. Same with the medicine. And it's quite easy to prepare wrong. Another question.
Can you make activated charcoal?
Most people can't. If you see a lot of like bushcraft sites and wilderness survival sites, they talk about making a charcoal, sand, grass, water filter where they tell you just to use charcoal from your campfire. Yes, it's charcoal. No, it's not activated charcoal. What activated charcoal is charcoal that has been formed under heat without oxygen and a lot of vacuum, and it basically draws everything out. Just a regular campfire charcoal will not get hot enough, and the overall vapor pressure is such that there will still be a lot of gunk trapped in the charcoal. It is not going to work as a super absorbent like activated charcoal will. Your best bet is to pre-purchase some activated charcoal. You can get it from Amazon. I should put that on my medicinal. Yeah, go to my store and then from there search for activated charcoal. In a pinch, you might be able to grind up some like aquarium filter charcoal, activated charcoal, but you want to grind it very finely. If you've ever seen the poison control activated charcoal, it's like a thick slurry. It's like drinking paint from what I've seen. I've never had to do that. But it's a real fine powder because you need a lot of surface area, because the more surface area you have, the more likely one of those bad molecules is going to bump into it and get sucked in. So, but generally making activated charcoal at home, unless the zombies are coming, you used up all your activated charcoal. You might be able to rig up a pump and some things like that to activate charcoal, but it's not going to be as good as commercially made activated charcoal right now.
How long before an overdose would symptoms begin to appear?
Okay, with pokeweed, there's a problem because usually within 12 hours, the symptoms appear. You feel like you have the flu or like a mild case of food poisoning. And then after about 10 hours of that, you feel fine again. And for the next 24 hours, you feel great. Everything feels good. And then after those 24 hours of good feeling, the SHIT hits the fan and you start expelling your bodily organs. So if you ever have pokeweed, poke salad, or poke medicine, and then the next day you feel kind of like you have flu, get to the hospital. Let them know what's going on because there's a good chance that the plant was prepared improperly and you got a dose of the poison. All right. Now, prickly poppy. This is a cool one. This is a very distinctive looking plant. Think like a cross between a milk thistle and a poppy. The plant itself is very spiny, very spiky, but not as sharp as a true thistle. It's sharp, but the thorns are still kind of flexible. And then the flower is your basic traditional poppy flower because it is in the poppy family. Now, the being in the poppy family, it does have some morphine-like properties, small amounts, but enough that can possibly trigger a drug test. So keep that in mind. So if you're using prickly poppy, that's, hopefully you don't have any reason to be undergoing a drug test later on. But the whole plant, the leaves, the stem, and the flower are mashed up and dried. It's a sedative, so it'll help you sleep. It is a pain reliever. Again, it helps soothe pain, both acute and chronic. And it's also an antitussive, which is just a fancy way of saying a cough suppressant. So think of it as it helps you sleep, makes the pain go away, and if you're coughing and have a real bad cough, it will help kind of sedate your throat muscles so you don't cough. Now, the seeds are a more potent pain reliever. So you would take the seeds from the prickly poppy, crush them up, and use those. And then it's also antimicrobial. It's good antimicrobial, but all things considered, if I had some sort of infection, I would hold on to the prickly poppy for its pain-killing properties and use some other plant to fight the infection. But it does have some antibacterial properties. Uses for it, they can both be made into a poultice or a tisane, infused oil, salve. So basically you want to draw out the chemicals from the prickly poppy either into alcohol, water, or infused oil. From a pain relieving point of view, the infused oil from the stem, flower, and leaves, mediocre. You're probably better off with aspirin. Oops, sorry. The seeds, like I said, have a higher strength or a higher potency. So for topical sort of applications, go with the seeds if possible. Now keep in mind, it's going to take a lot of seeds to make any appreciable amount of infused oil. If you have a huge field, prickly poppy, it spreads pretty well and there'll be big colonies of it, but you are going to get pricked a little collecting the plant material. Ooh, a question.
Is prickly poppy in Northeast Texas?
This is probably when he'll pull out the website.
Yeah, so remember, if you go to www.foraging Texas, and actually prickly poppy isn't on there, but normally the plants I'm talking about on Foraging Texas, there's both a Texas map and a North America map showing where you are likely to find it. In the case of prickly poppy, yes, you're going to find it out in East Texas. Now, it prefers open, sunny fields to the woods, so like inside the big thicket, you're not likely to find it. But along roadsides and farmers' fields and things like that, you're going to find it. Even right at the edge of woods, but generally it requires a fair amount of sunshine. It prefers full sun to full shade, if that makes sense. So good plant, has a long history. This was one of the key pain relievers of Native Americans in the area. But Western science has actually shown that it has beneficial effects and it actually will help suppress pain. And there's a question.
A couple more questions. First, is it more potent than an over-the-counter pain reliever?
All right. So is it more potent than an over-the-counter pain reliever? That's tricky to answer. The nice thing about over-the-counter pain relievers is they have a very uniform dosage, where with prickly poppy being an undomesticated wild plant, the amount of painkiller component can vary day to day and plant to plant. So in most cases, you're probably better off with, say, an aspirin, not Tylenol, but aspirin or Motrin or one of those. If you can afford it or you want to try something different, try the prickly poppy. But keep in mind the effects will be fairly variable, which is one of the frustrating things about wild plants, but that's also one of the things about wild plants. They have a higher genetic diversity and general toughness about them, but they can vary quite a bit. Okay.
Is this the one that requires some water processing?
Water processing. I mean, you can make a tea out of it, but it's not, if you're thinking like making morphine from opium poppies, no, it's not a process like that. It's, I suppose one could go through a lot of effort, but to my knowledge, the particular compounds are not in the sap. Well, there's some in the sap, but you're better off just grinding up the whole plant. Any others?
Nope.
All right.
Uncle Paul says hi.
Oh, hey, it's Brother Paul. Hopefully my dad is out there somewhere too. Hey, Papa Weather, hope you're watching. Hey, Mama Weather, hope you're watching. All right, moving on. Ragweed, dun dun dun. Now I'll say right now, if you are allergic to ragweed, you are going to be allergic to the medicinal compounds extracted from ragweed. So kind of sucks to be you. But yeah, ragweed does have some very useful medicinal properties, but if you're allergic to it, you're out of luck. So the leaves of the ragweed, and this is both for the common ragweed and the giant ragweed. In the picture I'm showing here, this is the giant ragweed. First off, it's a fever reducer. Now, like I've mentioned in the past, personally, because of the benefits of a fever, I believe that until the fever hits around 105, 106, you should just let the fever go, and even 106, depending on the age of the person. If it's an adult or a teenager, 106 is okay. If it's a 1 to 3-year-old, yeah, 106 might be a little high. Just best off going to the doctor there. But generally, as a fever reducer, very good at soothing the effects of cold, so the congestion, the runny nose, the general achiness, sniffly, I feel like crap feelings from colds. It's anti-diarrheal, yeah. So if you're having the flu and you're having the runs, again, the ragwood tea will help with that. It will help stop bleeding. Not as good as yarrow, but it will help. A crushed up plant applied as a poultice will help stop bleeding. If you're out in the woods, out in the field, doing something, you end up cut and you don't have band-aids or stuff with you, some ragweed chewed up and slapped on there will help stop the bleeding. Antibacterial, so it'll help keep the wound clean, assuming you don't have a lot of bacteria in your mouth, but hopefully it'll kill some of that too. Antifungal, so it makes a good body wash. Again, we're talking the tisane here, a tea version of it. A tisane is good for just fungal infections. And, oops, sorry. And it soothes general inflammations of the skin. So if you're just like sunburned or itchy, rashy sort of effect, a poultice of the ragweed will help with that. Is there a question?
We got a bunch of questions actually about
Poppy? So are there any?
Well, okay, let's go back to poppy quick.
Sorry.
Nope.
Are
Are there other wild edibles that may potentiate the prickly poppy's effects that you have seen in records of Native American usage?
Ooh, I would have to think on it. So, are there other plants that mimic the effects of prickly poppy? Yes, there are some. Here in the Texas area, not so much. Ironically, the wild lettuce that came with the white man from Europe actually has some benefits like that. But really, the prickly poppy is one of the better ones. Now, there are different plants that are sedatives, different plants that are pain relievers, different plants that are cough suppressants. But having all those things together, prickly poppy is one of the better ones.
Alright. How does the analgesic strength of prickly poppies compare to willow bark tea?
Ooh, good question. The analgesic. So, really, if you think about it, willow bark is just aspirin. There's the chemicals that make up aspirin. Well, there's chemistry involved, but it's basically extracted from the willow bark. I would put that for not for the pain relief, but for the anti-inflammatory and the fever reducer. The aspirin would be, or the willow bark would probably be better for actual pain relief. And all you are trying to do is pain relief. Probably the prickly poppy. It's going to be a bit more potent. Ooh, three more questions.
Several more, yep.
Okay.
Would a ragweed tincture work as well for long shelf life?
Kevin?
Yep.
Hey, Kevin. Okay, ragweed tincture. Yes, it's a good way of doing it for shelf life. The downside, if I was doing that, I would just use like a 40 proof alcohol. A lot of the components are more water soluble. So, if anything, what you might want to do, Kevin, is first make it to sane and then add Everclear to it to get the alcohol content high. So you would make like a double strength to sane and then add Everclear, basically pure alcohol to it to make it shelf stable. Another?
How do you make ragweed tea for diarrhea?
Okay, ragweed tea. Again, whenever you're making tea, it is best to use the dried plant. You want to let it sit around for at least 2 weeks. That breaks down the cell wall so the medicinal compounds can get out. After that, you want to get yourself at least a quart, well, really bigger than a quart, but you want to make this a quart at a time because you want to drink a lot of this. But basically bring a quart of water up to boiling, turn off the heat, let it sit for a bit, and add 2 tablespoons of the dried ragweed to it. Let that soak in there for 10 minutes. 30 minutes would be better. Strain out the ragweed, though really, if you really wanted to, you could probably consume the ragweed with it and then drink it down. So you're drinking at least a quart. Now, because you're fighting diarrhea and you're losing water and you're losing this stuff, you want to do that at least 4 times during the day. So we're talking a gallon of the tea when you're fighting diarrhea. For really any of the anti-diarrhea medicines, part of it is just drinking at least a quart, maybe not just slugging a quart, but you want multiple quarts of it to replace the fluid you're losing with diarrhea. Any others?
Several.
Okay.
So, how do you know you are allergic to ragweed, and what if you are allergic to ragweed?
Okay. If you are allergic to ragweed, you will know because during, the news will start talking about it's ragweed season. Ragweed is a wind pollinated plant. So when it's ready to make whoopee, it opens up these tiny invisible flowers. Most people don't recognize the little green bumps on the ragweed in late summer as the pollen producing part of it. This happens right around actually it's late summer, early fall when goldenrod is starting to bloom. And so a lot of times goldenrod gets blamed for the ragweed pollen allergy. But there's lots and lots of ragweed pollen going into the air and it triggers a traditional allergic response. So the runny nose, the watery eyes, the congestion, just the feeling of misery. If you are allergic to ragweed, then there's just avoid using it as a medication. Go back, watch some of the earlier episodes of Merriweather's World. Come up next week, watch future episodes of Merriweather World, and you'll get other plants that do all these features too that you can use instead of ragweed. The nice thing about ragweed is it's very, very, very abundant, and no one really, will ever say, no, you can't pick my ragweed. So, and it does have a lot of properties, so it's a great thing to have in your herbal medicine kit or in your herbal pantry. But, you don't want to use the medicines on people that are allergic to ragweed. Okay, any other questions?
Actually, people are very interested in this plant.
Okay.
So,
Well, go ahead. One more question, and then.
does ragweed or prickly poppy soothe psoriasis?
Ooh, for psoriasis, I would go with the ragweed. It's a slightly better, how want to say this, fewer side effects, with the main side effect of the prickly poppy being, positive drug testing. But as far as harvesting going, if you're dealing with psoriasis, you probably want a fair amount of this. There's a huge amount of ragweed in the world, so there's more ragweed. It's one of the things that is considered plentiful, which means you can harvest 80–90% of it, and God will make more. Whereas prickly poppy is more uncommon, and so you only want to take about 10% of it and leave 90% behind. So in the case of psoriasis, which is going to take multiple treatments, and the ragweed isn't going to cure it, but it may help soothe it some. But you're going to have to be doing it just about every day. So for that reason, I would go with the ragweed. Okay, what we will do is we will pick up with ragweed next week, because we're at 8:53 already, and I'm bringing in a new feature to the show. Basically, because I'm hugely egotistical, but most of you know that already. But this part of the show is called dun, 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 Merriweather's Real World. Woo, woo, woo. And in it, I'm going to talk about my real job some, where I will talk about some of the cool things that I've developed that may make your life better. And what I want to talk about today, and some of you may have seen this already, this is called Workman's Friend. It is a barrier skin cream. Now, let's talk about a barrier skin cream. Most hand lotions, they moisturize. They may have the allantoin that we talked about. They might help heal the skin. But a barrier skin cream is completely different. So the Workman's Friend Barrier Skin Cream, and you can get this from Amazon. It's also available in Lowe's. Now, I want to point out, I did not invent this. It was actually invented by a fellow up in Canada. What I did was help scale it up from a 500-gram lab batch into 8,000 gallons at a time. If anyone who cooks out there, it's a lot easier to cook for 2 or 3 people than it is to cook for 1,000. Same sort of problems. Now, when I talk about a barrier skin cream and how it's different from just your basic hand lotion, now, as you can see, it protects and moisturizes. Now the moisturize, well, let's talk about skin for a second. Remember, the surface of your skin, that surface layer, is actually made up of dead skin cells. Think of it, you have a thin layer of leather encompassing your body. Fine Corinthian leather, for those of you who remember that. So the leather is tough. It's really good at keeping a lot of things out. Now the problem is that those dead skin cells on the surface, as they dry and they shrivel, cracks appear, and there are gaps through that dead skin down to the living cells underneath. The cells are constantly moving up. The top ones are sloughing off, and the fresh ones are coming up. Now, the moisturizing aspects of most lotions, and the Workman's Friend, I always keep grabbing the wrong hand. The Workman's Friend, it does have that moisturizing effect. And what the moisturizing effect does is it causes those dead skin cells to swell and expand. And one of the features from that then is it seals off those cracks. So the moisturizing effect helps protect your hands some. But most chemicals can still get through there, through the dead skin, and work through there, and still cause problems. Poison ivy, paint, any super glue, anything sticky, anything staining. what the Workman's Friend Barrier Skin Cream, and I hope my boss is watching, though I didn't tell her I was going to do this, along with the moisturizing effect, then it also lays down an invisible super nanoscale layer of silicone. And then the silicone forms a protective barrier over the hydrated dead skin cells. And it doesn't just lay on top, it actually chemically binds to those dead skin cells. So that protective silicone layer is then stuck to those cells. Now, the silicone particles are large enough where they cannot be absorbed into the body. So if you're worried about that, the silicone entering your body, unless you're squeezing it into your mouth, that's not going to happen. The particles are going to stay on the surface, but you can't see them. They're still small enough to be invisible. Now, this layer of silicone, if you know about silicone, like silicone cookware, nothing sticks to it. Nothing can penetrate it. So suddenly you've put on this invisible layer of non-stickiness. That means then if you are gardening, normally you would get all dirty, the dirt just wipes off. If you are working on your car, working on grease and getting all the engine grease and grime on there, it just wipes off. If you're working with painting, wax on, wax off sort of thing, and you get paint on your skin, it just comes right off. Very, very, very cool. If you are concerned about the effects of DEET, D-E-T bug spray, you can coat yourself down with the barrier skin cream first. You need to wait 3 to 5 minutes, maybe even 8 minutes, depending on the temperature, to let that whole bonding thing occur. And then once it's bound on there, then you can start, messing around. You can mess with cement. You can work with poison ivy. It protects you from any of those plant oils or, anything from getting in and penetrating. Sharpie markers, I found the solvents in there, they can still even write on silicone. And so Sharpie, it does not protect you against Sharpie markers. In the case of super glue, it reduces the effect of super glue. So if you're, accidentally gluing your fingers together, if you just get a bunch of glue on there and keep them together, you're going to stay stuck together. But it will reduce in the effect. You can still get your hands apart and then, wash it with acetone to remove the super glue and your hands will be protected. Now, the human body normally sloughs off that outer layer of skin about every 4 hours. So that's from testing has shown that that protective layer of the silicone lasts about 4 hours. And after that, enough of the skin cells have been ejected from your body that we can't guarantee protection after that. So this is a really, really unique product, good for gardeners, good for mechanics. A number of beauticians have started using it to protect their hands from the hair dye. Basically, anyone who either works with something messy or stinky, it helps protect against cooks like garlic odor and things like that. So really, really good product. So this is just one of the things I'm responsible for. Now, what's cool about this is, like I said, I didn't invent this, but since we now have the Workman's Friend, I'm the R&D manager. So I'm coming up with a whole line of different Workman's Friend products that I'm really excited. A number of them based on the herbal medicine and things like that. So keep watching the stories, keep watching my website, and you'll see that. Okay, thank you for bearing with me, but I find that there's enough interest in what I do in my real job that I want to start bringing into it, and because I really like what I'm doing, and I really think I'm making some cool stuff that is worth sharing with you all. So the Workman's Friend is just one of many things. Now, last but not least, words of wisdom. As you know, I like to spread, some of the things I've learned from experience. So now tonight's words of wisdom is more based on how I've lived my life. There may be some argument that they aren't good words of wisdom and maybe not appropriate for everyone, or maybe a little tough for everyone. But it's simply this: spend as much time as you can in the deep end of the pool. Spend as much time as you can in the deep end of the pool. If you're not in over your head, you are not getting stronger, you're not getting better. If you're, in whatever you're doing. I've been in the chemical industry now almost 20 years. Yeah, actually over 20 years. I've mentored a lot of people. And one thing I've seen over the years is this fear that develops that these new hires and so forth, they don't want to try something new because they don't know how to do it. They don't want to volunteer for a project or something. And I tell you, yeah, you don't know how to do it, but I guarantee you, if the chips are down and you're under a lot of stress, you're going to figure out a solution to the problem. If someone throws you into the deep end of the pool, you're going to figure out how to swim. So that is how I've lived my life, constantly going, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Now, yes, you will have failure. And failure is just another way of saying delayed success. Because if you treat failure properly, you learn from it. Whenever I'm developing a new product, it's not unusual to have 160, 200 different formulations that I try before getting them. And so, 199 of them are failures. But when you learn from that failure, you know, okay, what you need to tweak next time. So my advice, when possible, be in over your head, spend your time in the deep end of the pool. All right, we're going a bit long, but are there any other questions about the workman's friend or the advice before we shut down for the evening?
Nope.
I'm guessing everyone just shut it off when I started talking about my real job. But my real job is really just as important to me as all this plant stuff. And what's great is I can meld the two. So at this point, it's after 9 o'clock. We've run a little long. Thank you for bearing with me. Merriwether, do you have anything else? They're just
Nope. Love you all. Bye. Thanks for making my dad happy.
yeah, because when I'm happy, the whole family's happy. It's kind of reverse of most people here. All right. Good night, everyone. Love you all. Bye bye.